Good evening. You're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. After the mega Houston rally, the action now shifts to New York, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi is attending the 74th United Nations General Assembly. Modi's visit has started off with a bang, no doubt, with President Donald Trump and several congressmen showing up at the Houston rally to show support. In fact, the visuals of Modi and Trump holding hands and taking a victory lap around the NRG Stadium in Houston, cheered on by a crowd of 50,000 people, will remain the defining moment of the Modi-Trump friendship. So much so that at one point Prime Minister Modi seemed to be endorsing Trump's bid for a second term, using the term abki baar Trump sarkaar. But now it's time to see what the Bonhomie actually yields. Do we see a breakthrough on steel tariffs the US has imposed on India? Do we see a return to GSP status for India? Do we see some leeway on visa issues? And should the Indian Prime Minister have tacitly endorsed the US President's re-election bid? To speak on all this and more, because a lot of action at the UN General Assembly in New York this evening, I'm joined today by Jaimini Bhagwati, former Indian Ambassador, Vishnu Prakash, former Ambassador to Canada and South Korea, Kawal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, and Sushant Sareen, Strategic Affairs Analyst. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for speaking with us on the India Development Debate. Mr. Bhagwati, let me come to you first on the issues of what we really need to get out of the sort of bonhomie we've seen and what it means. We discussed extensively yesterday on the show, as well as the pictures were coming in about the Modi-Trump relationship. How does it translate into the India-US relationship, especially on tricky trade issues?
Well, the United States is still the largest economy in the world. It runs a consistent trade deficit, a current account deficit. So to that extent, it's a little concerned about its perennial trade deficits, particularly with countries like China. With India, it does run a small trade deficit in goods, but in terms of the overall volume of US trade, this is a very small amount. So I'm hoping personally that the relationship between US and India is strong enough for the two leaders to be able to overcome some of the, what I would call, minor irritants. For example, with regard to Harley-Davidson motorcycles, the tariff charged by the Indian side is considered abnormally high by the US side. But you also referred to GSP, the Generalized System of Privileges.
Yeah.
At some point of time, India has to also be prepared to graduate out of some of these kinds of privileges, which India had a lot. There's an inconsistency between India's growth in absolute terms as an economy, also in per capita terms,
right,
and also its growing sophistication in various areas of technology, and the request to be at the same level as some of the smaller countries. Of course, the problem then is that in fields such as textiles and garments, we might find ourselves at some disadvantage with regard to countries in Asia.
Yes.
But on that, I don't want to get into that now because that will become a much longer discussion. On that, we need to reform laws here in terms of labor to allow larger garment and textile businesses to prosper.
All right. The question is that the India-US relationship, especially with concern to trade, has a lot of the times in the last few months been going on a very different trajectory as opposed to what we see when President Trump and Prime Minister Modi actually meet. Let me come to Kawal Sibal on this aspect. Is it a little ambitious to expect all those wonderful pictures out of Houston, Texas to translate into something solid for us at the end of all of this?
First of all, you have to see these things in perspective. we've had trade differences with the United States going back to the 1990s. After 1991, when we started liberalizing our economy, the Americans came forth very strongly. They were the largest investors. But the issues have not gone away. In President Obama's time, for example, the US Congress mandated the US International Chamber of Commerce to report on India's IPR, trade and investment policies. So pressure, the USTR has always been negative. From the time that I have served in Washington, they've always been very difficult to us. And they continue to be so. Now, the current issues between India and United States, from our point of view, are relatively minor in scope. They are not at all at the same levels as the US issues with China, which involve stealing IPR, stealing technology, currency manipulation, etc., etc. With us, the issues are much narrower. They relate to the cost of medical devices, some IT some duties, some tariffs on IT products, some issues relating to dairy products, etc., etc. These can be resolved, and our Commerce Minister has been saying very confidently that all I need is a 2-3 hours of solid talk with Robert Lighthizer, and we can put all these issues away. And that most of these issues have been resolved, and even the IT issues, if these companies which have some grievances, or other e-commerce companies which have some grievances, if they went and talked to the RBI governor is in a state of mind to give them satisfaction. However, Lighthizer has still not given an appointment to our Commerce Minister to go to Washington. They have exchanged documents, so they are currently talking to each other, but still the jury is out whether there would be enough progress made for the two sides to be able to announce an agreement on the pending trade issue. So it's not a large trade deal. It is getting the irritants out of the way, and one would actually expect that this should be done. However, I'll end by saying that at the Houston summit, President Trump changed his tune on these issues, because he talked about Indian companies investing in the United States. He singled out the steel sector, where they have applied duties on our exports of steel. He also singled out job creation by Indian companies in the United States. He talked about energy cooperation. So he had a very positive message to give. He did not talk about the trade issues. This does not mean that the trade issues have gone away, because in New York they'll talk about it. And hopefully both sides will be working overtime to address these issues and have a minimum agreement so that something can be announced.
Sure. Valid points, all of them, Mr. Sibal. I'm not so sure about the data protection issues and the reference you made to the meeting with the RBI. Because data protection is something which is a red line for us. I want to bring in Sushant Sareen over here. And Sushant, just get your view in on the trade issues, and also what Trump says in Houston may not be what he says in a bilateral meet. Also want to bring to everyone's notice that Trump is meeting Imran Khan possibly today, who's also going to be at the UN General Assembly. We're going to hear a lot of Kashmir also coming at this platform in the next few days. You think the Houston euphoria will last? Amazing visuals. What comes next?
Look, one thing I've learned, you never try and predict what either Mr. Modi or what Mr. Trump are going to do. So I can't say whether after today's meeting with Imran Khan, Trump might say something which kind of, takes off the luster of what happened yesterday. But that's the nature of the beast. If that happens, that's okay. I think we need to be very clear that the Pakistani relationship with the US is a very limited relationship. It is very, very transactional. It is limited to primarily terrorism and Afghanistan. With India, I think this relationship is a far more robust kind of a relationship. It has a lot more heft than anything the Americans have with the Pakistanis. On the trade issues, I think Mr. Sibal is absolutely right while it is quite possible that some of the irritants might be removed in the next few weeks, maybe in the next few days, but once these issues are removed, there will be other irritants which will come up, which is, you know, again in the nature of the game, that once two large countries are trading with each other, some issue or the other will keep cropping up, and you have to keep smoothing out the edges. And I don't think there's any big structural problem in the trading relationship between India and the US as it is between the US and China. So I don't think you can compare that relationship. That is one point. The other point is that from our point of view, while, you know, people like Mr. Sibal and myself, we worry a lot about the strategic aspect, the defense relationship, the fact of the matter remains that if you look at the numbers, in a $140 billion, $150 billion trade, the defense trade is less than 5%. And the other trade relationship between India and the US, you know, far outweighs anything that we do on the defense trade. So this focus which we put on the defense trade, I don't think it is quite correct. But what is important is the fact that we are now routing purchases from the US in the defense sector, and we are increasing our energy imports from the Americans, means that we are tying ourselves in a lot more closer strategically with the Americans than what we had done in the past. So it is not just about economics and the trading relationship, but the larger strategic relationship, which, because we are now in a sense leveraging our energy security and our other defense issues with the Americans, I think that is the way to go. And finally, one last point, the fact that now we have upscaled the meeting of the Quad, for which we have to thank the Chinese and the stupidity which they did by backing the Pakistanis on Kashmir. The foreign ministers are now going to meet the Quad countries, US, China, US, Japan, Australia and India. We are now taking it up to the foreign minister level. I don't know what is the kind of structure they'll build around the Quad, but I think for that we have to thank the Chinese.
Okay, interesting comments there. Let me come to you, Ambassador Prakash, on you know, the first part of it, and I'm going to move on to other bits of analysis that we need to do, including that endorsement of Trump's re-election. But let me come to you on the trade issues and the basic question. All of this is great to see, but it needs to translate, and you know, now we say that the trade issues are not that minor. Let's remember there have been tariffs and retaliatory tariffs between the two nations in the last 1 year. And those issues have cropped up time and again. Compared to China, India may not be such a big bugbear, but it's definitely on the list.
Well, very much, Tamanna. India is very much on the list because President Trump, for him, he believes that he understands trade, and trade comes to the forefront when he talks to any country. So yes, from his point of view, it is an important issue. But I could not agree with my co-panelists more. Look at the complexion of the trade, and particularly the game changer, I think, I am using the word game changer very consciously, was the energy summit that Prime Minister had at Houston. The very fact that 75% of the LNG from the US is being imported by India. Every year the import of hydrocarbons, LNG in particular, is multiplying. And as the third largest energy consumer in the world, our need will continue. So I guess energy is going to be one of the major imports from the US, which will have a beneficial impact. I have always maintained that some kind of accommodation needs to be shown for tactical reasons to the US. I mean, let's take the famous case of Harley Davidsons. You know, I was looking at the statistics, something like 2,800 Harley Davidsons are bought in India. That's 2,800 alone. That's about it. Of which a bulk of them, or 80% of them, I could be off a little here or there, attract a 15% duty because they come as a CKD kits. So it is perhaps no big deal. Let us give him something to feel happy about.
Yeah.
But the important thing, Tamanna, is that look at the journey in the relationship. From estranged democracies to engaged democracies, and today one of my senior colleagues mentioned that we have become embracing democracies. I mean, how tight is the embrace, what it will lead to, is anybody's guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have come a long way, and there are something like 60 dialogue mechanisms between India and the US.
Yeah.
Everything under the sun is being discussed. And the last point I would like to make is the big difference between India and the US on one hand and US and China on the other hand is that even in the foreseeable future, under any scenario, India and the US have a strategic convergence. We do not have a strategic divergence. In other words, as a fellow democracy, we will never be a threat to the US. So I guess the convergences are there, and as my fellow panelists have been saying, there will be irritants, but I mean, you know, we have the confidence, the ability to sort them out across the table. I am very bullish, Tamanna. I can say that categorically.
No, I mean, absolutely. Since the nuclear deal, the India and the United States relationship has taken a substantive shift. And to be fair, this has been beyond the last 6 years of the Modi government. This has taken it maybe to a new level in terms of personal chemistry. What we're trying to understand is what that translates into. And in that context, let me play out a bit of the speech from Houston, which raised some eyebrows at the point when Prime Minister Modi seemed to be almost endorsing second term for President Trump, almost like an election pitch. Let's listen in.
The words of candidate Trump, abki baar, Trump sarkaar.
Ambassador Bhagwati, you know, the noises have come in saying that should an Indian Prime Minister be seeming to endorse a re-election bid, technically maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but what's your sense? Because at the end of the day, it's a relationship between India and the United States. We don't know what's going to happen in the next American elections. It could be Trump, it could be someone else. Does it matter to us? Beyond the point? It's a relationship between two nations.
No, you're absolutely right. I'd like to take a step back, and very frankly, I haven't looked at the full speech to be able to make a comment whether what Prime Minister Modi said was appropriate or not. But I'd like to make an overall comment on India-US relations. India, given the fact that it's a democracy, given that a number of Indians have gone and done well in the US, have studied there and are occupying very high positions, given that people-to-people relationship, India will always be a friend of the US. I don't think it can be an ally, and definitely not a subordinate ally. So that is my overall comment on your specific question, that so we have to be careful, because our economy is what? We are 2 point something trillion, the US is 18 point something, so they are roughly 8 to 9 times our size, with 1/4 the population or thereabouts. So their per capita income is very high. My co-panelists have already touched upon various issues. I'd like to touch upon something, again, taking a step back from just the event in Houston, because this has been a long relationship over the last 72 years of India's independence. And currently, the US is out there in the forefront when it comes to lethal autonomous weapon systems. It is also very au fait with the military abuse of the latest advances in biotechnology. This is to change the genetic composition of deadly viruses. Now, in addition to trade, and in addition to technology, in addition to the IPR issues, particularly IPR when it comes to pharmaceutical products, we produce generics, and the US pharmaceutical companies have always viewed the low prices that, for instance, Cipla charges for medicine that is needed by AIDS patients. Taking a step back from all that, given that one of the biggest advantages of India is its human capital. We must obviously have human capital, because they go and do so well wherever they get a chance, and also in India. So I'm hoping that this interaction, whether at Houston or at New York, will also lead to greater and closer interaction, not just in India buying weapon systems from the US, but more of co-production where possible, more of co-research where possible. And as I said, these are two areas which I don't know whether it gets as much attention as it deserves. You heard about the drone attack in Saudi Arabia, whether these are Iranian drones or whether they are Yemeni drones, most probably not Yemeni drones. But the fact of the matter is that some of these technologies are deadly. And I think India, as a large country which is disproportionately advanced when it comes to human capital as distinct from economic or financial capital, could perhaps work more closely with the US to further the interests of the world at large.
Yeah. With complete diplomatic aplomb, Ambassador Bhagwati, you have deflected my question completely. But I will give it to you that you haven't heard the speech. The fact is that it seemed like an endorsement. Trump was, I don't know if you saw it or not, I'm sure you have, but Trump was sitting there pretty much like a fanboy. And they are very fond of each other, and all of that is great. My question is very simply that this is a relationship. I'm going to try again, Ambassador Bhagwati, so give me that. It's a relationship between two nations, and the personal chemistry between leaders matters. Doesn't matter beyond a point, because these are relationships and decisions and conversations which become part of a larger sort of tapestry of what goes on between these two nations. So I'm going to come back to you with that question. Do you think it was appropriate, Ambassador Bhagwati?
On that I completely... No, I totally agree with you that any seeming endorsement of any US candidate for the US presidency is not in our interest. And howsoever remote it might be, it's not good for... You remember all that talk about Russia influencing the last US national election and so on, and a lot of people in the US are exercised. Of course, that accusation is of a much larger magnitude and I suppose substance. Whether it's right or not is another matter, but the public perception is important. Over here also, you have a good point that if there is a public perception in the US that the Indian Prime Minister is endorsing President Trump to be re-elected in the elections in 2020, that does not serve India's national interest. But as I said, I am yet to come to a definite conclusion, and here I'm not trying to somehow avoid your question. I genuinely don't know exactly what context in which it was said, and whether it is really a direct and obvious endorsement of President Trump. But I basically agree with your point that no Indian leader, not just the Prime Minister, no Indian leader, no government official should in any way seen to be taking sides with the Republican Party or leaders of the Republican Party or the Republican president, and on the other side the Democratic Party or the leaders of that party. We don't want to be taking sides, because that is something that we would be very uncomfortable if, let us say, country X, I'm not going to say US, is seen to be taking sides between the BJP and the Congress and endorsing one party or one party leader over another. In fact, in the past, in the 1970s, as you might recall, there was so much talk about CIA involvement in Indian politics, and and the other accusation was that the KGB too was very, very involved, not just in influencing individuals, but also disbursing money during elections. So since we have, I don't know how much of that is true, but I think some of it was true, since we were so sensitive about any foreign interference in our national elections, by an extension of that logic, we should not be getting involved in the elections in any way whatsoever in any other country, and definitely not in the US, which is
Absolutely.
still the largest economy and the strongest military power.
Absolutely. Okay, I saw a lot of smiles over there in reference to the 70s, which I do not remember, but of course I have read about. Ambassador Prakash, you want to come in on that point that the personal chemistry is great, but
can I say something?
But it's an extension. Okay, Kanwal Sibal wants to come in. Let me come to Mr. Sibal first. Yes, Mr. Sibal.
Look, you have to see these things in perspective. You are making too much of a fuss over a playful comment that he made. First of all, if President Trump comes to an event where 50,000 Indian Americans are gathered and where Prime Minister is going to address them, why has he come? He has come because he calculates that being alongside Prime Minister Modi, who's very popular with the Indian American community, he will be able to garner votes in the next election. How much he is able to garner is a different question. But his calculation, apart from demonstrating friendship with Prime Minister Modi, was very much electoral. That is one. The other is, if you recall, the Senate Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer, he's a Democrat, he welcomed the Prime Minister. In the front row, there were congressmen who were both Republicans and Democrats. So it was a bipartisan affair. Even Steny Hoyer mentioned that India has bipartisan support.
Yeah.
Prime Minister is too clever a politician to put his foot in his mouth and make it evident that he is endorsing President Trump for his next election. This is not the case. What he really said was, I just heard him say, candidate Trump said this.
Yeah.
And this was the play upon abki baar Modi sarkaar. That was a slogan during his election.
Yeah.
So it was just a playful comment. One should not read too much into
Okay,
this. Neither is the
Ambassador Prakash wants to come
American
in.
political class going to understand that he is endorsing the President Trump. It's not true.
Okay, no, and 4.4 million Indian Americans, maybe 1 million of them voting, might not make a difference. But is there a signal going out? There was bipartisan presence at that rally. There were Democrats there as well, and significant congressmen there as well. Ambassador Prakash wants to respond. Yes, Ambassador Prakash.
Tamanna, I think I would agree with Ambassador Sibal about the nature of the comment. But, what did Prime Minister say? He referred to candidate Trump and he said, abki baar Trump sarkaar. Did not say ugly baar Trump sarkaar. So he's not talking of, he's not talking of the next time, he's talking of the present continuous. So what is wrong with that?
Okay. I mean, with all due respect,
the last
with
bit
all
is
due
that
respect, sirs, to all of you, the entire campaign for Prime Minister Modi before 2014 was abki baar Modi sarkar, talking about what they hope would happen, not what is already happening. So
I only heard abki baar, which is present continuous, Tamanna. I mean, maybe my understanding and comprehension is very limited.
Okay.
But also last comment, there is a very big difference, between something done in a cloak and dagger fashion, which certain countries are accused of, and a playful comment made in a bipartisan forum. So I would not read too much into that.
Okay.
I think I would like to leave it there.
Okay. Sushant, you want to come in on this? A lot of, explanations coming there from Mr. Sibal and Mr. Prakash of what he really meant. I mean, I don't know what he really meant. I'm just talking about what it looked like because there was a victory lap after that. Yeah, Sushant.
No, look, the point is that we like to see what we like to see.
Yeah.
But I think Ambassador Sibal is quite right that the Prime Minister is too smart a political cookie to make this kind of a blunder. And I think what he has done is he's left it sufficiently ambiguous. You can read it the way you want to read it. Technically, he did not endorse Mr. Trump. If you look at what he said, he did not endorse it, and he was speaking in a certain context, and he said that this is the phrase which he used, and it helped him win the election, kind of a thing. So I think the ambiguity was there. People have read it the way they wanted to read it. For example, you are reading it in a very in the sense that he seemed to be endorsing Mr. Trump. A lot of other people have done it, but my interpretation is the same as Mr. Sibbal and Ambassador Prakash's, that this was a playful comment. He wasn't endorsing him, but in a sense the way he laid it out really thick on Mr. Trump, the way he praised him to heavens, I think that kind of apple polishing.
I mean, imagine if it was actual. No, Sushant, my simple point is,
nobody can complain about that.
My point is, if this was not an endorsement, then imagine what an endorsement would have looked like. I mean, all seasoned experts on this panel, so
well, if somebody asks him for an endorsement, then you will get to know.
Yeah, I mean, if this wasn't one, I wonder what an endorsement would look like. That would be difficult to then imagine. But nevertheless, let's come to the broader issues and what really. Yes, Mr. Sibbal.
Look, it will amount to an endorsement if this is followed up by similar statements and actions on the ground, where our embassy or pro-Trump politicians in the Indian American community are proactively, at the instance of the government or whatever else, or the embassy, stage rallies, etc., in favor of Trump. That means get deeply involved in the electoral process in the United States, which would be very foolish and suicidal. This is not the intention. This was just to humor Mr. Trump and to please him. And the fact that the two holding their hands high up in the air and walking around the stadium can also be misconstrued by the Democrats to say that Modi is paying far too much attention to the president, but he has to. Trump is the president of the United States. He might well become the president next time. So what is wrong with that? This is good diplomacy.
Okay, this is good diplomacy, but what's good business for us? That's a different concern. Mr. Bhagwati, I want to come to you on what we should look at as a country from the United Nations General Assembly at this point. A lot of big meetings, of course, lined up, and our focus back here in India when we look at such events seems to focus a lot on Kashmir, what Pakistan is going to say, trade deals, etc. What would be the key things you would be looking out for from the next couple of days?
The United Nations, unfortunately, has diminished so much in importance. Ever since George Bush Jr. Withdrew the proposal they had at the UNSC for armed intervention in Iraq, because the French foreign minister, I'm sure murder his name in terms of pronunciation, Villepin, had objected in what I thought was very eloquent, in very eloquent terms, as to why the international community should not intervene in Iraq militarily. Having said that, the UN got one big blow at that time, because the largest economy, the most powerful military nation, chose to ignore the UN. And since then, the United Nations, you'll think I'm kind of skirting your issue about what will happen in the UNGA, but we are talking about an organization that has, for a variety of reasons, because ultimately the United Nations is as important as the important countries around the world choose to make it. Because we have other bodies now, whether it is the G20 and so on, and then we have smaller groupings like the BRICS and the SCO and so on, in which we are involved. But the UNGA still continues to be a place where heads of government are present sometimes. Sometimes their foreign minister or somebody else represents the nation. So yes, it is possible that our neighboring country to the west, very small country, I feel, in terms of their economy vis-a-vis us and the condition of its economy as it is on its knees begging the IMF for one more tranche. So I would hope that we do not in any way give any fillip to any kind of rehyphenation of India with Pakistan.
Yeah, we don't want that.
With great reluctance, I even mentioned the name of that country. I prefer to call it the troublesome neighbor to our west. Because there are people around the world, and including in the United Nations, both in the Secretariat, as well as other countries which will send delegations there, who are more than happy to play this game because it suits their interests, and time will not permit me to get into the interests of diverse elements as to why they would like this issue to be played up, and particularly played up as a potential spot for a nuclear battle between these two nuclear weapon powers. So that's what attracts the attention of the international media. That's what attracts the attention of those who are genuinely concerned about the accidental use of nuclear weapons and the possible consequences for the globe as a whole. So that element will be played up, and I hope our diplomats, our government functionaries will be able to diffuse that kind of a play that some elements, including our western neighbor, would like to push at the UN. So that's as far as that issue is concerned. I'm not even getting into Kashmir and those kinds of issues.
I'm short of time, and I want everyone's comments to come in. Sushant, you indicated you wanted to speak, and then I'll come to Ambassador Prakash. Yes, Sushant.
So look, as far as the UNGA is concerned, I think at the end of the day, it's a bit of a talking shop. It always was. It will remain a talking shop. Now, I disagree with the ambassador speaking earlier that, Ambassador Bhagwati, that, the US has actually reduced its influence or whatever. I think it remains the single most influential country in the world. And the fact of the matter is, all the other groupings you talk about, SCO and all of these, BRICS and all of that, effectively it is 0 plus 0 plus 0 is equal to 0. So I think, you really can't move a lot of things without the US anymore. But on what he calls the troublesome neighbor on the west, and I call the neighbor from hell, the fact of the matter is they are going to do saber rattling. They are going to try and create this impression that this is a nuclear flashpoint. This is not something new. This is an old trick in their playbook. They've been using it for the last 3 decades. Every time things kind of heat up between India and Pakistan, they use it. But the fact of the matter is that every time they use it, there would be the bleeding hearts of the New York Times variety who probably start taking this rather seriously. But most other people would actually come on them with a ton of bricks that this is irresponsible talk, and they'll actually be shooting themselves in the foot by doing this kind of saber rattling. So I think we should play it cool, the way I think the Prime Minister played it yesterday, and not make too much of a song and dance about it. If he feels the need to talk about 370 and other things, although I don't see why he should, if we consider it to be an internal matter, I don't see why he should talk about it, at the UNGA. But if he wants to take a few pot shots at Pakistan on the issue of terrorism, that's fair enough. But other than that, I think he'll look at the big picture and, play the role that he needs to play.
No, so we don't want a rehyphenation. It sort of seemed like it was happening again in the last time that Trump met Prime Minister Modi and Imran Khan. He's going to meet Imran Khan now as well. So we'll wait and see what happens and how this all plays out. I'm absolutely out of time, but I want to thank all of you for this wonderful conversation this evening as we track Prime Minister Modi's journey in the United Nations General Assembly. We're doing that because we want to really see what it means for India at the United Nations General Assembly and what this friendship with Trump, who's right now POTUS, means for us in the long run. We're taking a very short break. When we come back, some policy talk. It's been 1 year since the Ayushman Bharat scheme has been launched. It's supposed to be the world's largest healthcare scheme. It's not been an easy year. What are the learnings? What are the challenges? What comes next? CEO of the program, Dr. Indu Bhushan, joins me next.